Hey everyone! Thanks for checking out part 3 of my PlayStation 4 retrospective. We are covering the third year, well really the second year because the first one was so short, but yeah, 2015. This time we're going through all of the physical exclusives. The digital stuff I'll have up right after this, and the multi-platform stuff I'll have up soon after I've got this generation done for exclusives. There's going to be a couple games that came out on other consoles just because a lot of stuff came out on Vita and PS3 as well, but the PS4 is what I consider the best place to play most of them. So if you haven't seen my retrospectives before, I go through all the games I think are notable for that year, for that console. I do my best to include things that I think everyone should know about and not just things that are important to me. I try to make it as comprehensive as possible, but exclude a lot of the common stuff like the sports games and that kind of stuff that people are going to check out no matter what if they're into it, but I don't think are really notable as a whole. So before we get into it, thanks to everyone who's checked out my retrospectives so far, and if you haven't yet, please subscribe. It really helps me keep going with these. And let's get right into it. We're starting off the year with a highly anticipated exclusive that didn't quite live up to its expectations, but that is The Order 1886. This is a third-person shooter that takes place in an alternate steampunk version of London, where a secret order of knights take on monsters including vampires and werewolves. The game features cover-based shooting with multiple weapons, melee attacks, and quick-time events over 18 chapters. The game was made by Ready at Dawn, who had created a bunch of excellent PSP games, and it was technically impressive, but not that well received just because it was short and the gameplay variety wasn't there. Next up, the first game I have in my collection. This is the steelbook that comes with the special edition. This is Bloodborne. This was From Software's spiritual follow-up to Dark Souls that was a huge success, bringing a ton of new fans to the Souls series. Bloodborne takes the methodical action combat of Dark Souls and brings it into a new gothic horror setting. Gameplay changes include a focus on firearms and dodging instead of relying on shields. Overall, the combat is faster and has much more of an emphasis on offense. Even though the story was kind of vague like your typical Dark Souls game, this time it featured some kind of Cthulhu-inspired mythos, so it's pretty interesting. Next up was Tokaiden Kiwami, an update of Omega Force's Monster Hunter style game on the Vita. This game is a port of that and basically contains a full expansion on top of the original content. New features include twice as many demons to hunt, 2 epilogue chapters, 2 new characters, and new weapon types. Following that, Omega Quintet, a turn-based JRPG starring a group of magical girl idols who fight the Blair, a strange phenomenon attacking the world. While the main gameplay is standard second-rate JRPG fare, the game features some interesting stuff, such as creating dance videos to promote the idol group, and some unique fan service features where the girls' costumes are torn as they take damage. Overall, though, I feel like the singing and dancing stuff didn't tie into combat as much as I would have expected from this type of game. It's a bit of a letdown to me, but it really does have that visual style of an idol group RPG, so worth checking out for fans of niche but not that great RPGs and, that kind of visual anime idol style. Oh, I forgot to turn on my lights. Next up, a port of the PS3 game, but still one I had to pick up from my collection. That is Final Fantasy X and X2 Remastered. These are basically just updates of the Final Fantasy X and X2 collection that came out on PS3. There's nothing new here, it's just available on the PS4. I feel like that PS3 version did come out kind of late in the PS3 life cycle there, so it's cool to have on this console for people who sold or already unhooked their PS3. Keeping the Final Fantasy train going, next up is the first expansion to Final Fantasy XIV, Heavensward, I'm not quite sure how to say it. This basically increased the level cap and doubled the content from the original game. It also added 3 new PvP modes. There's a new race and 3 new classes and new flying mounts, so, obviously not interesting for people who aren't playing Final Fantasy XIV, but Final Fantasy XIV was so well received, it's great that, this content came out, and from what I hear, people really ended up loving it. Following that, one of the first big kind of Shonen Jump games to come out over here, J-Star's Victory Versus. This is a fighting game that's filled with the Shonen Jump characters. If you don't know, in Japan, Shonen Jump is a big anthology magazine and has chapters from a whole bunch of different mangas in it. There's a whole bunch of these magazines, but I think Shonen Jump is the most popular. And a lot of the most popular manga started in Shonen Jump, so definitely some characters you know here. This game has 39 playable characters, as well as support characters from 32 different series, including Dragon Ball, Naruto, One Piece, Hunter x Hunter, Yu Yu Hakusho, and many more. Matches can be 1-on-1, 2-on-2, or 4-player free-for-alls. The game features an adventure mode that's split into 4 segments, where the player can upgrade their boat and travel from island to island, fighting and recruiting other characters to their team. Overall, it was alright. I mean, it's just cool to have these kind of anime fighters with such a huge cast of popular characters. So really just by hearing that, you'll know if this is a game for you or not. It's not the best fighting game, the story mode isn't the most complex, but it's interesting. Following that, another game I had to upgrade from my PS3 version. This is Deception 4: The Nightmare Princess. This game includes the base game, Deception 4: Blood Ties, and its expansion. It's similar to the previous games in the series, where the player must set traps and lure their enemies into them. The game's plot revolves around the daughter of a devil who is trying to reclaim the 12 pieces of his soul to revive him. And another PS3 remaster, one I waited a long time to get until it was dirt cheap, but that is God of War 3. There's nothing new about this port, it just runs at 1080p and 60 frames per second, so it looks a little nicer. The game features all the extra costumes that were also downloadable content for the original game, and the Challenge of Exile mode add-on. So some new stuff. A lot of people that played it on PS3 didn't really need to check it out again, myself included, but if I ever do want to check it out, this seems like the best way to play it, so that's why I picked it up. And right after that, a game that is notorious, let's say, Ochinbara Z2 Chaos. This is the 6th game in the Ochinbara, or Onchinbara, I'm not quite sure how to say it, series. It has the returning Bikini Slayers taking on zombies and other monsters throughout a series of levels. The game features 2 sets of characters that the player controls, and you can swap between the characters in each pair throughout the stage. Each character has a unique set of abilities and attacks, and like the previous game, it relies heavily on fan service. The combat system is improved quite a bit, and it's actually pretty good combat. The one thing that turns me off of it is just that the enemies are such damage sponges, and it takes forever to take out even the weak enemies. So it's a cool game, but it does kind of grind a bit. Following that, we got I believe the physical release of Helldivers, the top-down 4-player co-op sci-fi shooter by the developers of the PC hit Magicka. The game has the player taking on various missions using different weapons, equipment, and vehicles in order to take down 3 alien races threatening Earth. It's a great co-op game if you haven't checked it out. You have the ability to call down different weapons or vehicles or kind of turrets. It's a cool game. The game was released earlier this year as a digital edition, but the physical one was released in August.
Reliable and safe. Become heroes of the Federation.
Next up, a cool game for fans of the One Piece series, that is One Piece Pirate Warriors 3. This is cool that we got it physically because Pirate Warriors 1 and 2 for PS3 never came out here physically. Like I said, it's a Dynasty Warriors style game based on the One Piece manga and anime by the Dynasty Warriors developer Omega Force. Pirate Warriors 3 covers content from over the first 740 episodes of the anime. It starts right from the beginning, so even though I'm sure Pirate Warriors 1 and 2 covers that stuff in more depth, you'll still get a bit of that here. The game features 37 characters, including 10 new characters over the previous games. Each character can be raised to level 50 through grinding, and then to 100 by collecting rare items specific to each character. So if you want to get everything in this game, I bet it's a ton of work. An updated version was released digitally only on the Switch later, but yeah, this is I believe the only physical exclusive. Following that, an interactive adventure that, shows David Cage how it's done, Until Dawn. This is a narrative horror game in which a group of teenagers take a vacation in a cabin a year after one of their friends has gone missing. The storyline is really interesting. It features a whole bunch of different horror tropes and really plays with a whole bunch of different genre stuff. There's some decent actors in it and some good performances, and it's just a fun kind of slasher turned into a narrative horror game. The game has the player controlling each of the kids exploring the cabin and its surrounding areas. Decisions made along with the actions performed during QuickTime events determine which, if any, of the kids live through the night.
With the consequences.
Then we get Tearaway Unfolded, an expanded remake of the Vita title Tearaway, which is a third-person platformer taking place in a papercraft world where the player can grab and manipulate objects in order to complete various objectives. The original game relied heavily on the touchscreen. Those features have now been mapped to the touchpad on the PS4, and while it doesn't quite work as well, it's still a neat way to bring this cool style to the PS4. While the content is mostly the same, the gameplay feels quite a bit different on the PS4 controller, but still worth checking out for anyone who hasn't played the Vita game. Next up is Disgaea V, which at this point I think is still the latest release in the series. The hardcore Japanese tactics game returns with a new story and a new cast of characters. The game is told through a series of flashbacks in which the main character travels to 5 different netherworlds in order to recruit their overlords to fight back against the impending Void Dark. Which makes for a really interesting story, and because it's a new cast of characters like most of the Disgaea games, you don't really need to play any others in the series if you're interested in this kind of thing. The game features all the high-limit stats the series is known for. The new hardware allows for up to 100 characters on the screen at once, which makes it really impressive. New systems include a revenge system, a fusion attack system that lets players pair up their characters for super moves, and 5 classes from the previous games return, along with 3 new classes. The most interesting new class being maids that use guns. Following that, where God of War let us down by only putting out 1 update, Uncharted, the Nathan Drake Collection, gives us all 3 of the Uncharted games from the PS3. This game includes all the single-player content from Uncharted 1, 2, and 3. They've been updated to run a little better, but none of the multiplayer stuff is there. Instead, it included a beta for the Uncharted 4 multiplayer. Following that, Dragon Quest Heroes, The World Trees Woe and the Blight Below. Long title. This is another Omega Force developed Dynasty Warriors style game, this time set in the Dragon Quest universe. The game features new characters and locations inspired from Dragon Quest and has all the classic monsters the series is known for. Gameplay is the standard hack and slash fare that Dynasty Warriors is known for, but some RPG elements are brought in to help it feel a bit more like a Dragon Quest game. Visually, it's really impressive. If you're a big fan of Toriyama characters and monsters, definitely worth checking out. The RPG stuff helps it feel a bit less grindy than typical Dynasty Warriors games, but it is still a slog. Next up was the Talos Principle. This was a puzzle game that was often compared to Portal, but is quite different in scope and tone. The game has the player controlling a robot with seemingly human consciousness while solving over 100 puzzle rooms, in which they must deactivate force fields and turrets in order to collect sigils in each area to progress to further areas in the game. The game features a serious philosophical narrative surrounding the nature of AI, and this PS4 version includes the PC game's Road to Gehenna expansion, which features a new robot character, narrative, and set of puzzles. Next up, another game in the Tales series, Tales of Zestiria. This is the 15th main entry in the Tales series. This is a series I have a hard time keeping up with for obvious reasons. One big change is that battles no longer take place on separate screens now. Similar to games like Chrono Trigger, battles take place right where they happen on the world map and in dungeons, which is really cool. The updated battle system, they always have to call them something different. This one is called the Fusionic Chain LMBS. The action RPG-like combat has the player controlling melee characters and Seraph characters that can use healing or attack spells. This is kind of a sequel to the game that comes out later, Tales of Zestiria, because it shares the same world with that game, which is something rare for Tales games. Next up, another RPG, and one based on a popular anime, Sword Art Online Lost Song. This is a follow-up to the digital-only Sword Art Online Hollow Fragment, and its prequel Infinity Moment, which was only released in Japan. It follows the canon from those games, which is similar but pretty different from the light novels and anime. Lost Song takes place in the second game from the series, which is the second half of Season 1, the Alfheim Online game. It has the player creating a character and going on missions alongside SAO characters like Kirito. The gameplay is more like an action game, simplifying the RPG elements from the previous game. It has the player in parties of up to 3 players as they explore dungeons, and the player has the fairy wings from that world on their character that allow them to fly during exploration and combat, which changes up the gameplay a fair bit from the previous one. Right after that, great entry in the low-budget but fun co-op shooter series, Earth Defense Force 4.1. This is the remastered version of the PS3's Earth Defense Force 2025, which features an all-new expansion of content. The game has 4 classes players can choose from, over 700 weapons, and features a typical horde of alien insects through a series of destructible environments. Like the previous games, it's simple but a ton of fun. And lastly, a game I picked up in a bargain bin I never heard about, or else I probably wouldn't even be mentioning it, but it is pretty cool. That is Among the Sleep. This is put out by a small publisher that puts out some really bad stuff, but also some good stuff. So it's hard to know what you get with them, and this ended up being a surprising game. It is a physical release of the digital title in which you control an infant navigating a series of stages, solving puzzles and sneaking past monsters. It's a first-person narrative horror game where the player discovers more about the infant's family life while looking for his mom. It's a kind of a short game like those typical narrative ones, maybe about 2 hours, but I found it really interesting and atmospheric. And that's it for PS4 stuff for 2015. A great year, the start of the real floodgates that are going to open up next year, but some great stuff this year. This is the year I think PlayStation finally started to get a foothold over the Xbox, and we really see that next year. But yeah, ton of great exclusives to check out. I'm going to get into the digital stuff really soon, so stay tuned for that video, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!